Welcome to NovoEDTalks, where we reveal real-world strategies and expert insights from learning and development professionals. In every episode, we chat with practitioners, course designers, learning strategists, and business leads. We hear about their experiences in the learning industry and predictions for the profession and the trends that they're seeing. But before we get started, a little bit about NovoEd. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithms Lab in 2012, NovoEd is a people-centric capability-building platform that combines social and collaborative learning to drive performance readiness at scale. Through cohort-based experiences centered around human interaction, NovoEd taps into collective wisdom, placing each learner at the center of perspective, application, and expertise. Large enterprises such as 3M, GE, Marriott International, and Nestle partner with NovoEd to accelerate their critical initiatives, reconnect teams, and achieve rapid alignment through learning that is felt, experienced, and swiftly transformed into impact. Now, let's meet our guest for today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NovoEDTalks podcast, a space for training trailblazers to get real. My name is Melissa Fisk. I'm the producer of the NovoEDTalks podcast, and today I am joined by Sue Novak, who is the Dealer Engagement and Experience Training Manager for BMW of North America. Sue has over 20 years of global experience in L&D and HR, including 13 years at BMW. She is a master trainer and executive coach known for building high-performing, purpose-driven teams, guided by the belief that a customer will never love a company until your employees love it first. She champions instructor-led development to create trust-filled, empowered workplaces. Sue, I love that quote. Thank you so much for joining us today on the NovoEDTalks podcast, and welcome.
Thanks. I can't take credit for it. Simon Sinek's quote, but it resonates with me. So
Yes, I love that. And I think that resonates with all of our listeners here. But why don't you start by just kind of introducing yourself a bit more, your role in your company?
yeah, thanks, Melissa. Thank you for having me. First of all, it's great to be here. As you said, I'm the Dealer Engagement and Experience Training Manager here at BMW of North America. So what that means is in my role, my team and I focus on customer experience training and leadership training for our dealership associates, so for our franchise dealers, as well as helping them with their recruiting and retention strategies.
Wow. Exciting. And what an exciting company to work at. I feel like
Not
everyone.
bad, yeah.
Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about kind of, these, different dealership folks that you're dealing with, what some of their, biggest challenges are that they're facing?
Yeah, so as you said, our learners are our dealership associates. So that could be everyone from the porters to parts and service managers, parts and service advisors, sales managers, technicians, general managers, a little bit of everything. And the retail automotive industry is extraordinarily fast-paced. And that can present its own challenges. Each role has its unique customer interactions, depending upon what they are doing and how they're interacting with the customer, and that has its related challenges. So what we hear from our learners is that sometimes they find it difficult to implement the learnings that they get from these trainings because of the fast pace of their day-to-day. Everything seems great when you're in a training class and you go back to the store and the fires still have to be put out. So they find that difficult. And understanding that sometimes to be more efficient or faster, you actually have to slow down first is a new way of thinking for them. So like with anything that's new, it takes time.
I'm sure. I mean, I think that's, any aspect of our life when we're like running crazy. It's like, oh, we need more and more. And it's like, okay, take a beat. It's not the instinctual thing that you want to do, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Why don't you talk about some of your bigger like workforce development challenges and how you're approaching them?
So I think one of the biggest challenges that our target audience faces are communication breakdowns, both with the customer or with internal colleagues. So we spend a lot of time in our trainings, both customer experience training and leadership training, talking about bridging those gaps. So building trust and rapport to develop those long-standing relationships. In our trainings, we challenge our learners to do some self-reflection. We actually have assessments that they'll go through. And then we work through such things as active listening, coaching, body language to build that trust and rapport. We find that those skill sets are equally important for the associate to customer relationship, or the associate to associate relationship, or the manager to associate relationship. So building and using these skills is an ongoing process. That
Yeah.
creates another challenge because in the retail automotive world, they're working on a monthly schedule, right?
Right.
We always say you're born on the 1st, you die on the 31st, 12 times a year. And so they have monthly targets, and in retail, that's what they're used to doing. So now you're trying to apply an ongoing skill set in a
Mm.
monthly mindset. So that becomes a challenge too.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely a unique one, probably for although I'm sure that applies to some other organizations, but would love to hear kind of more about that if you're looking at, the different skill sets as those are shifting and like continuing to adapt and evolve with such a changing workforce, what strategies does your team use to ensure that, your team stays adaptable and prepared?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the biggest thing we focus on is adaptability. That's like the magic word. It's like our abracadabra, for lack of a better explanation. So our belief is every topic we teach, and I use teach in quotes because we like to say we facilitate, not necessarily teach, but every topic we teach needs to have an immediate applicability in the learner's day to day.
I love that.
Yeah, so we spend more time on interactive activities, best practice sharing between the participants, or what we call practice, drill, and rehearse activities than we do on traditional teaching. And then we end each training session, whether it's in person or virtual, with a discussion about implementing change. What we want to do is try to prepare the learner for the inevitable challenges they're going to face when they try to change what's been done in the past. Because if they're well prepared and they have a plan, they're less inclined to abandon that effort when they're faced with that resistance.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that though, that concept of like teaching or, facilitating, as you say. I also like that. A skill or something that they're going to then go and turn around and use right away, because I think that's so important, like for us to really retain that knowledge is to be able to apply it like right away, which is great.
Yeah.
How does your team assess and address, skills gaps within your team, and how do you stay agile and keep them ready for the next thing?
Okay, so in addition to looking at metrics like NPS and things like that, we have actually several dealer committees that we work with to really try to understand what the needs of the dealer network are. Obviously, at the corporate headquarters, we have our goals and targets. But our dealerships also have their unique individual goals and targets. And I think it's at the intersection of those two ideas that the greatest success can actually be realized. I've found in the past, I've been in learning and development for quite a while, and I find that in too often organizations get caught up in what I call a single-minded approach. They have good intent, but unless you understand what all parties need and everyone understands what the WIFM is for them, what's in it for me, it's really hard to get buy-in, and implementation is a huge challenge. So that goes back to what I said earlier about applicability. What we teach has to be applicable to the learners day to day. Otherwise, you're just reading out of a textbook.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. Do you have, you mentioned NPS. Do you have any core KPIs that you look to help measure the effectiveness of the programs that you're running?
Yeah, so as you know, and all of your listeners do, this is one of the biggest challenges in the learning and
Oh,
development space, you
yeah.
know. And I always say, how do you measure the effectiveness of what I like to call human skills training?
Sure.
So measurement will vary depending upon the training. So obviously, like everyone else, we have the standard feedback from the learners. We use an NPS score to understand what's resonating with the learners, what might need to be tweaked or adjusted. And there are other metrics that can be measured depending on the topic of the training. For example, with our customer experience training, we can track the dealers' NPS scores, their customer NPS scores, and the sentiments. So we can see if we're having a positive effect on their interactions. Key thing to remember, and I think sometimes training professionals get stuck with this, is that training doesn't happen in a vacuum. So there are many things that affect different metrics. There are sales programs, there are initiatives that come out. But when you're able to make a correlation between, say, sentiment scores and the topics within your training, then you can begin to analyze how our training might play some part in the success of the store. I think you got to stay away from absolutes, like our training did this
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, but it is a contributing factor.
Absolutely. I love that. And I like the idea of using like the customer NPS to kind of measure that, because that's ultimately like going to drive the overall like business goals as well, right? Like that's going to
Yep.
have an impact on that. So you want to be able to tie that back. But I think you're right in that it can't be like an absolute. Can you share an example of a successful case study or an L&D or mentoring initiative that you've implemented that, you can point to and say, okay, this has really impacted, the organization overall?
Yeah, for sure. So one of my favorite L&D initiatives was when we first rolled out our current customer experience training. So in order to build a program that again was applicable, we embarked on what we called a co-creation event. And we had a mixture of frontline dealership employees, corporate field team representatives, key stakeholders from headquarters. And we took everyone to Las Vegas for a 2-day event where what we did was build the blueprint for the content of the training program. So we sent all the participants into the wild for what we call a luxury experience. Maybe they went shopping at Coach or Louis Vuitton, or maybe they went to eat at a high-end restaurant, have a meal. And after their experience, we regrouped and dove into what they saw and felt as a customer. Then we talked through what worked, what didn't work. We took all that information and worked in small teams to apply that to the different touch points of our customers' journeys and how they could affect those different touch points within the customer's journey. From that, we actually built the training content that was applicable and real life. So we found by working jointly with our dealership and field teams that we ensured applicability, and we had immediate buy-in from participants because instead of corporate telling them what to do, they were learning from their peers.
Yeah. I love that. And
It was
also,
super fun too.
I was just gonna say, I want to participate in that next round, please. No, but that's so cool and so powerful, like for so many reasons. And I think, you can really take in a lot from that by looking at to see like what others are doing in that like same kind of comparable brand space. So what a fun, like you said, that would be so fun initiative, but powerful too.
Yeah, and the content has actually really, really resonated with our dealership employees because of that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking about technology a little bit, what role does technology play in your programs, and how do you kind of leverage different tools and platforms to enhance those experiences?
So that obviously is a challenge as always, as anything new that comes through, and technology ever evolving, right? So the big thing is I think we need to be careful not to just jump on the next big thing because it's cool. I
Yeah.
actually had a conversation with someone the other day who was talking about a training program they wanted to do, and we want to use AI in our training. I said, all right, well, what's the objective of using AI? Do we want to use it just because it's cool, or do we have a real reason?
Yeah.
So we've tried a couple different things in the past. We've had AI assessments of videotaped interactions, chat bots. We've tried a bunch of different things, and some we've adopted, and some we've had to shift course because maybe they didn't necessarily work. So I think the key when you're implementing technology or trying something new is to constantly monitor both the feedback and results to determine if the technology is enhancing the learning or if it's becoming the thing. An interesting thing, I find that our attention spans, just as a society as a whole, have gotten smaller and smaller. In
Mm,
fact, I read recently, and this is really scary, but I read recently that the human attention span is now shorter than a goldfish's.
sadly doesn't really surprise me, but
Right. So
terrifying.
that being said, we've got to make sure that any online learning bite-sized, right? Quick video clips that can be referred to again and again to keep the learning current. Pushing a reminder to read a short article, watch a short video, answer a few short questions. I think that those things can help to keep the learning front of mind. So from the idea of gamification or things like that, that technology can do for us. Using it is critical to stay relevant, but you also just have to be mindful of how you're using it. And are you using it to enhance your training, to enhance the learning, or are you using it just because it's cool to say I use it?
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of concept has come up here on the podcast before because, it can be, I think, really intimidating to be like, oh my gosh, there's so many like AI tools. There's so many different things that we could be doing. There's so many cool technologies that do X, Y, and Z or claim to do like X, Y, and Z, and it's like you really have to think to like, okay, one, like, is there like a gap that, technology could fill? And if there isn't a gap, like, are you trying to force it into something, just like what you're saying, like don't just always be like, oh, the next new like shiny bright thing, because I think you can ruin your programs like by doing that. And if you don't like know who your learners are and really know what's going to help them.
Yeah, and there's no harm in trying something new. It's just that constant monitoring and feedback to
Yeah,
make sure that you're actually reaching the audience
yeah,
you want to in the way you want to.
yes,
Yeah, for sure.
absolutely. Thinking about obviously, you've got some experience in L&D, as looking back over the past even just like 5 years, what do you think, you know what are some key takeaways that you've seen that have really shifted in the last 5 years?
So I think as the world becomes more digital, the human interaction has become even more important. It's so easy to get drawn into the digital world, YouTube, texting, IMs, AI, virtual reality. I mean, I get drawn in all the time. And what's happening is there are people, especially the younger generation, but even the older generation, they're just losing the ability to physically interact with other humans because it's easier to send a quick IM or a text or an email.
Mhm.
So as your attention spans get shorter and technology has evolved, we've got less and less opportunities to actually experience these physical interactions, and that makes it critically even more important to get it right. So, for example, a manager who has to have a difficult conversation with an employee, doing that through email or text or IM, that's never going to go right. But I have managers who do that.
Mhm.
And so what we need to do is prepare our leaders to be coaches, to make the time to know their people if they really want to develop high performers. We need to remind people that while the use of technology can help and is an important thing, it can't be a crutch that you rely on when things get uncomfortable.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's so true. And we're probably all guilty of doing it like here or then, like, ooh, I should call this person, but I'm going to send a text instead because
Of
it's a
course,
difficult thing.
yeah.
But that's, especially for managers and any kind of like leadership roles, that's so important to be able to continue, especially, like that makes the difference. I think you can have like people can look at a hard conversation and be like, okay, maybe that wasn't like, the feedback I wanted or what I wanted to hear, but I really respected the delivery. And I think that is so powerful and important. And I love that, that's a key focus for you all and like such an important takeaway. I think that's really, really true and something that anyone who's doing any type of like leadership development program should for sure keep in mind.
Yeah, and sometimes you forget. I mean, to your
Yeah.
point, like we get caught up in
Yeah.
technology, right?
Yeah.
So if we lose that, it's those instances, the shorter and shorter they are, the more and more important they become.
Exactly. Absolutely. Kind of on the flip side of that question, if you're looking to the next 5 years and looking at, technology and everything that's coming with AI, what do you see happening or like what are you doing to kind of prepare for the next 5 years?
So that's a really good question. And I'm a big believer in a constant state of learning. So I mean, how can you be an LD and not feel like that? But so I mean, I'm a big reader. So I'm always looking for what's coming out, what's happening, what have other companies tried, what has worked, what hasn't worked. And like I said earlier, there's no harm in trying something new. So we'll roll things out to a small group of people just to see how does this work? How is this happening? I mean, I was just in Atlanta and I saw the now infamous Waymos driving around. And I thought to myself, I'm never getting in one of those. I need a driver. And but then as I sat back and thought about it, I'm like, well, actually, the Waymo's never going to try to make that turn before the car gets there. It's going to wait until it's the right time. So maybe there's a value to that. And I think it's that challenging your long held beliefs when it
Yeah.
comes to anything that's coming out. A
Mm.
lot of things I'll read about and I'm like, no way, we could never
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
But you have to stop, right? Slow down and say, hey, how could this potentially be used and give it a shot? So I think, I didn't think 5 years ago we were going to have the things we have right now.
Yeah.
So who knows what's on the edge of 5 years from now?
Yeah.
With the way things evolve, I think there's going to be a lot that will help us do our jobs better.
I love that. And I think that that reminds me a lot of being a parent, right? Where it's like, I think that my husband and I have these conversations. We'll never do that as parents, or like, we'll know how to handle this problem. And I'm like, I don't think those are going to be the problems when our kids are teenagers. I don't think that we know what that's going to be yet.
No,
I
it's
think
true. I mean,
that's true especially with where we're at with technology.
yeah. And my kids were born before the iPhone came out, and then, and now they're in their 20s and grown, but still like the things that I thought I was going to
Yeah.
experience,
Yeah.
we're completely different. So,
Exactly. But I think that's such a good, powerful point too, where, we can't really fully prepare what is to come in the next 5 years. So just like, preparing your mindset for like not having that, total, no, I'm not going to do that, for some preconceived notion you have about something that might be coming out.
yeah.
To close on a positive note, Sue, what's the most important lesson that you've learned on your journey that you would pass on to someone just starting out on their maybe leadership journey?
I think we've touched on it. I think, being open-minded, never, I don't want to say never saying no, but never saying no just because. I
Yeah.
think we all have biases. We all, whether we know it or not. I mean, we just have experiences that we've had as we've grown in our careers, and things have worked a certain way. But always being open, that continuous learning, reading, listening, surrounding yourselves with people who just know more, see more. I think the biggest takeaway is you don't have to be the smartest person in the room.
Mm, I
And if
love
you surround yourselves with a really solid team who has great ideas, just sit back and let them shine. Provide them the opportunities to to do that. Often people are promoted through the ranks because they're good at what they do. And to use Simon Sinek again, I'm a big Simon Sinek fan. He says when you move into a leadership role, you're no longer responsible for the work. You're responsible for the people who are responsible for the work. So I think just as with any other skill, you have to learn and practice leadership.
Yeah.
So never stop learning and growing, and keep that open mind.
I love that. And that's such a good, I've actually never gotten that response to this question, is how you just phrased it, which is like you have to keep practicing leadership, because I think that looks a little bit different than like practicing like a very specific technical skill set. But for sure, it's something that, as humans evolve, we have to evolve in any type of leadership that we're doing.
Yeah. And I think people, when they get promoted, they think, okay, that means I'm supposed to be the smartest person. I'm supposed to know everything now. But I think it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
It's surround yourself with great people, and allow them the opportunity to shine.
Absolutely. Sue, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the NovoEd Talks podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you so much for having me. I really had a great time.
Awesome. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to another episode.